Okay, we're gonna look at solving to find out what interval this function is less than 0. So if we look at a graph, and if we were to draw the function on here, I wanna know when it's below the x-axis. So the first thing you're gonna do is make one side equal to 0. So this one already has a 0 on the right, but if it doesn't, you can move everything over to the left so that the right side equals 0. The next step you're gonna wanna do is to factor it if possible. So if I look at the top, I have x squared minus 3x minus 4. If I find two numbers that multiply to -4 and add to -3, the numbers would be -4 and 1. So if I factor this, it's gonna be x minus 4, x plus 1. If I factor the bottom, two numbers that multiply to 30 and add to 11, it's not 15 and 2, 6 and 5. So x plus 6, x plus 5. When you get to this step where it's factored, now we can pick out some key points where it's going to cross the x-axis. So on the top, you see that if you put a 4 in here, this bracket would equal to 0. So positive 4 is going to be a key point. If you put a -1 on this side, this bracket would equal to 0. So -1 is also a key point. So positive 4 and -1. I'm just going to put a dot on my graph at positive 4 and -1. The other key points are going to happen on your bottom because you cannot have a 0 in your denominator because you cannot divide by 0. So what would make this bracket equal to 0? X would have to be -6, and this one, x would have to be -5. So at -6 and -5, I'm also going to put markers there as key points because I know x cannot equal those. Those are going to be some asymptotes. Okay, so I have all my key points here. I'm going to make these into intervals. So on the far left, I have a -6. So one of the intervals is going to be -infinity to -6. So -infinity to -6. I want to know -infinity to -6 if the function is going to be above the line, greater than 0, or below the line, less than 0. Remember, if I look at my inequality here, I'm looking for when it's less than 0. So that's my first interval. My second interval happens between -6 and -5. My third one is from -5 to -1. Then from -1 to 4. And then from 4 to infinity. I want to know all of these spots if it's going to be above 0 or below 0, above the axis or below the axis. So here's how I set up my chart. I got to test 4 things here: x minus 4, x plus 1, x plus 6, and x plus 5. If I'm going to test it, I'm going to pick a point in between -infinity and -6 and just try it in here to see if it's going to be a positive or negative. So if we pick a number between -6 and -infinity, let's just say it's -7. That's going to be my test point. If I put a -7 in here for x, -7 subtract 4, all I want to know is if it's going to be a positive or negative number. In this case, -7 subtract 4 is going to be a negative. -7 plus 1 is going to be a negative. -7 plus 6 is going to be a negative. -7 plus 5 is going to be a negative. If I have all of these and they're all being multiplied or divided together, because if we look at our function, they're all being multiplied or divided. So if I just look for pairs, I know 2 negatives makes a positive, 2 negatives makes a positive. That means if I put a -7 into this function, it's going to be a positive number. Is a positive number less than or equal to 0? No. So I don't want this one. I know that this one is going to be above the x-axis somewhere. And I want to know when it's below the x-axis. So it's not that interval. What about between -6 and -5? Unfortunately, I'm going to have to pick a number in between there. So it'll be -5.5. -5.5 subtract 4 is going to be a negative. -5.5 plus 1 is going to be a negative. -5.5 plus 6, ooh, now we're getting into positive. And -5.5 plus 5 is a negative. So again, if I pair these up, 2 negatives become a positive, that's a positive, and I end up with an odd negative here. So my answer is going to be a negative, which means it's going to be below the x-axis down here, which is less than or equal to 0. So that's a good one. We like that one. That one's below the x-axis. Pick a number between -1 and -5, any number you want. I'm just gonna pick -2. If I plug that into -2, subtract 4, we have a negative. -2 plus 1 is going to be a negative. -2 plus 6 is gonna be a positive. -2 plus 5 is gonna be a positive. Again, these are gonna pair up to become a positive. These are all positives, so my answer is going to be a positive, which means it's going to be above the x-axis in between -1 and -5, which I don't want that. I want to know when it's below the x-axis, less than 0. So that's not a good one. Don't want it. Pick a number between -1 and 4. Let's pick 0. 0 subtract 4 is a negative. 0 plus 1 is a positive. 0 plus 6 is a positive. 0 plus 5 is a positive. Unfortunately, we got one negative here, which means our answer is going to be a negative, which is actually what we want. It's going to be below the x-axis here somewhere. Between -1 and 4 is below the x-axis. So that satisfies this less than or equal to 0. So that's a good one. And we got one more, in between 4 and infinity. So let's pick 5. 5 minus 4 is 1, positive. 5 plus 1 is 6, positive. 5 plus 6 is 11, positive. 5 plus 5 is 10, positive. These are all positives, which means it's going to be above the x-axis somewhere. I don't want that one. I want below the x-axis. So we actually only have 2 intervals where it's going to be below the x-axis, in between -6 and -5, and in between -1 and 4. So how we write this is we just say it's between -6 and -5, and -1 and 4. Now there is a trick here. I want to put a square bracket when it can equal that number. And it can equal it at 4 and -1 because that just makes it equal to 0, which is okay. We like that. So at 4 and -1, I'm going to put a square bracket. It can equal those numbers. Why can't it equal -6 and 5? Because that would make the bottom of this 0, the denominator 0, and we cannot divide by 0. It doesn't exist. So it doesn't exist at -6 and -5, so we actually put round brackets here. It goes all the way up to -6, but doesn't include it. This one has square brackets because it can include it. This is your final answer. This is the interval at which x is going to be, the function is going to be below the x-axis. So less than or equal to 0. Final answer.